You hear it all the time, right? The rich get richer, the poor get poorer. It kind of feels like it's always been that way. But has it? Is this widening gap just, a fundamental law of human society? Well, we're going to dig into that because the real answer is way more complex and honestly a lot more surprising than you might think.
I mean, we've all seen stats like this one from Oxfam. It's shocking. Just 8 people, that's less than a basketball team, holding as much wealth as almost 4 billion other people. It's a number that really frames the whole conversation today and makes you wonder, have we hit some kind of all-time peak for inequality?
And hey, it's not just about a few individuals. This concentration of wealth is happening on a massive corporate scale too. Just think about this. One single company, NVIDIA, is now worth more than every publicly traded company in the entire United Kingdom combined. The sheer scale of it is just mind-bending. But to really figure out if today is truly different, we have to look back in time. And that's where things get really tricky.
So here's the fundamental issue. How on earth do you compare wealth across hundreds or even thousands of years? It's not as simple as just using an inflation calculator. The very definition of what it means to be rich changes completely.
Okay, let's just take a look at Emperor Augustus. This guy literally owned Egypt. It was his personal property. He commanded armies. His power was, unimaginable. But let's be honest. Would you actually trade places with him? You'd be giving up antibiotics, air conditioning, the internet, all of it. It just goes to show you that a simple dollar-to-dollar comparison is pretty much useless.
And, even our best modern tool, net worth, gets really weird when you apply it to history. A brand new college graduate with a mountain of student debt technically has a negative net worth. So on paper, they are poorer than a medieval serf who, sure, had nothing, but at least had a net worth of 0. It's a system that just produces totally absurd results.
So clearly, we need a better way to measure this, a kind of universal currency that gets at what wealth actually is, the power to command and consume real-world resources. And that's where this really clever new lens comes in, energy. Think about it for a second. Everything we use, everything we consume, from the food we eat to the phone in our hands, it all requires energy to make and to use. Heating your home, driving your car, building a skyscraper, it all comes down to energy. So a unit of energy, like a gigajoule, becomes this almost perfect yardstick for consumption, whether you're living in ancient Rome or right here, right now. And what's so powerful about this method is how neatly it solves our biggest problems. That student with debt, from an energy perspective, they're just borrowing future consumption. All that paper wealth from stocks, it doesn't really count until it's used to consume actual energy and resources. And best of all, it gives us a single common ruler to measure any person from any point in history.
Okay, so let's put this new tool to the test. It's time for the ultimate showdown, the most powerful man from the ancient world going head-to-head with a titan of the modern age.
First, let's just set the scene. As you can see, the average Roman citizen used a tiny sliver of energy compared to the average American today. But Emperor Augustus, his incredibly lavish lifestyle clocked in at around 14,000 gigajoules. That's 1,000 times more than his average subject. A huge gap for sure. But how does it compare to now?
And here it is. Just the fuel for Elon Musk's 2 private jets in a single year burns through over 62,000 gigajoules of energy. Let that sink in. We're not talking about his companies or his houses or anything else. This is just his air travel. So what this means is that a single modern billionaire, through just one single form of transportation, can burn through more than 4 times the energy of the entire resource-heavy household of the most powerful emperor in history. The gap between the top and the average person today isn't just wider. The consumption happening at the very top is on a scale that was physically impossible in the past.
So that brings up the next obvious question. Why? Why has this gap become so extreme? Well, the answer seems to be that the fundamental rules of wealth itself have changed. You've probably heard this old saying before, right? The first generation makes the money, the second generation enjoys it, and the third generation blows it all. It's kind of a comforting idea because it suggests that massive fortunes just naturally dissolve over time, and that social mobility is just a natural cycle. Yeah, except it's completely wrong. It's a myth. It's a nice story with almost no data to actually back it up. And it ignores the very real structural reasons that wealth today is stickier than ever before. I mean, just look at the actual evidence. There was a study in Florence, Italy, that found that the wealthiest families in the city 600 years ago are still the wealthiest families today. This happens partly because modern fortunes can just grow way faster than they get split up among heirs. But there's a more fundamental reason. When the rate of return on capital, on investments, is higher than the rate of overall economic growth, wealth just naturally concentrates at the very top. It's almost a law of economic gravity.
And this really gets to the heart of the shift. Old wealth was land. It was physical, you couldn't move it, and it tied a nobleman's fate to the fate of his kingdom. But new wealth is capital. It's stocks, intellectual property, digital assets. It's totally mobile, it's global, and it doesn't have an allegiance to any single country. It can just pack up and move to wherever it's treated best.
So historically, when massive inequality has been reduced, it's usually been through some pretty extreme events. We're talking about incredibly aggressive policies like a 77% inheritance tax, or the literal destruction of capital and wealth during World War II, which essentially leveled the playing field, or, actual revolutions that completely rewrote the rules. Not exactly subtle solutions.
Which leaves all of us with this one final critical question. The promise of our economic system is that the pursuit of wealth drives innovation and progress that ultimately benefits everyone. But as we've seen, wealth today is more concentrated and more globally mobile than at any point in human history. So when does that gap become so wide that it no longer fuels progress, but instead starts to crush the very opportunities it was supposed to create? That's the question history leaves for us to answer.